Tonight, I want to talk about the NFAC, particularly the leadership Grandmaster J, of which I'm referring to as Grandmaster Coon. I already did a radio show on him, talking about the whole NFA situation with him being indicted on the federal charges. Put a lot in perspective on the radio show I did, but I feel like I didn't go hard enough. I went soft because he made some recent statements that put everything that I was talking about in perspective. And Grandmaster Coon is very relevant right now to the Black freedom, Black liberation, and Black sovereignty conversation. It's very relevant. It's a very eye-opening conversation. It's very important, to say the least. So that's why I'm going to touch on that subject. It's I think it's very relevant. And some things can be distinguished, some things can be brought out, some certain contradictions can be exposed. But before I get started, I'm not going to waste your time tonight with a lot of music. I'm going right in on my topic. But before I do so, I just want to play a clip of a recent interview he did after he was released on bond. He did an interview. This is one of 3 interviews that he did, and he made some statements condemning anti-government militias. So I want y'all to hear this for yourself. I did post it on my website, so many of you all have heard it, but I'm going to play it again just in case you haven't. So bear with me.
Heard about what happened and what they were about to do and was dead serious about doing it. And it hit me. Why are they calling this group of people a militia when that's not what they was? This is a gang of terrorists. Yeah, they exercising their right to constitutionally carry their weapons, but this shit that they sat down and did was straight up terrorism. Now, y'all know your boy, and far be it for me to speak from the top of my head, I just happen to have the full report, the actual report. And I've already read it in detail because you can see where I've highlighted certain things. I want to raise the question, what is the difference between a terrorist and someone that's a militia? Because if you're trying to mix the two together, that means that all of a sudden you're trying to call all these people that have been standing up for their rights and exercising their constitutional values, that now they're terrorists. Well, I noticed that you hadn't dropped no names yet, but why did it become an issue now? I couldn't dream of what could be making them want to do all of this and raise this question. And if that wasn't bad enough, before I even dig into this document right here, I was then blindsided. Didn't even see it coming around the corner. I see an article popped up in the New York Times, popped up within hours ago, and it says the plot against Gretchen Whitmer shows the danger of private militias. They already starting the narrative, y'all, because what they want to do is say that all militias are illegal, because if they do that, they also take out the black militia. But y'all don't look at it like that. Y'all gonna sit there like a bunch of idiots and say, well, maybe we shouldn't have no militias. That's exactly why they put it in the Constitution, so that if the people had a grievance with the government, they could arm themselves and go deal with the tyranny if they felt there was tyranny. The interesting thing is, the NFAC is probably the only militia that's ever existed that doesn't feel that way. So you don't see us sitting around talking about, we want to overthrow the goddamn government. We can do no shit like that. That's why we don't fit into the narrative where they keep coming around talking about, so if the election doesn't go the way that you want it, are you going to have your black militia in the street to fight the white? I'm not going to be in the street shooting no motherfucker over Trump. See, that's the narrative they want to paint. But we done shook that one off. Matter of fact, we done shook off every narrative that they try to stick on us. You see what I'm saying? Anything to put us in the group with the rest of these clowns over here sitting around doing shit like this. Oh my God, when I read this. June the 6th, we hadn't even gone to Stone Mountain yet. They was already up to this shit. So this ain't got shit to do with the black militia. June the 6th, Crofton Fox and approximately 13 other people from several states gathered in Dublin, Ohio. They talked about creating a society that followed the U.S. Bill of Rights where they could be self-sufficient. They didn't want to be governed no more. They wanted to do their own thing. Several members talked about murdering tyrants or taking a sitting governor. They brought that shit up in the meeting. The militia group had already been brought to the attention of the FBI by a local police department in March of 2020, when members of the militia group were attempting to obtain the addresses of local law enforcement officers. At the time, the FBI interviewed a member of the militia group who was concerned about the group's plans to target and kill police officers, and that person agreed to become a CHS. Here's my problem with this document already. Notice they keep slipping in the word militia. They haven't told me what the name of the militia group is. They haven't told me what this militia group stands for. They haven't told me what their original mission was, because these people, like, they just got together so they can go and do this shit. We're going to kidnap the governor and overthrow some shit. That ain't no goddamn militia. That's a terrorist group. They had a meeting at one of their trainings back in June 18th where Fox told Garvin that he planned to attack the Capitol and ask them to combine forces. Then there's a part in here where it says the operation focuses on Governor Whitmore. It says on June the 14th, CHS-2 participated in a consensually recorded telephone call with Fox, who described the meeting in Dublin, Ohio, and Fox said he needed 200 men to storm the Capitol building in Lansing, Michigan, and take hostages, including the governor. Militia? Terrorists. Fox explained that they would try the governor of Michigan for treason and said they would execute the plan before the November 2020 election. Well, what's right around the corner? Goes a little further. Listen to what we're saying here. On June the 20th, they had a meeting at a shop. Listen to this. I'm reading this. I'm not making this up. Which was accessed through a trap door hidden under a rug on the main floor. If that ain't straight out of what is The Walking Dead? Who wrote this? Straight out of the movies, bruh. This is terrorist. This ain't no militia meeting. I don't think anybody in the NFAC has ever had to go underground inside of a wall where we had to pull back the bookcase and do the statue head back and push the button. We ain't never had to do no shit like that. Ever. That's not a militia. Terrorists. Keep going. The attendees discussed plans for assaulting the Michigan State Capitol, countering law enforcement first responders, and using Molotov cocktails to destroy vehicles. Who been watching too many movies? Okay? There's another section called Training and Planning to Kidnap the Michigan Governor. I'm just going to drop down to one line out of all of this craziness that they were doing, all the training and the meeting and who was meeting who and how they was doing it. There's a line in here that said they were told to leave if they were not willing to participate in attacks against the governor and in kidnapping politicians. They gave people a chance to walk out. Look, y'all, we about to get into some real shit here. And if this ain't really what you about, leave. That's not a militia. That's terrorists. And then it goes to show you who stayed. Then they went out and bought tasers. They were talking about going to the lady's house. At one point, somebody was even talking about they went to the governor's house, and they actually was going to pull this shit off up until 2-3 days ago when they went and bought the taser, paid $4,000 for some night vision shit. They was about to shut it down, and on several occasions, they made sure that they let it be known that the leader expressed his intention and desire to kidnap Governor Whitmer before November the 3rd of 2020. They got shut down on October the 7th. That is the document right here. You can go read it for yourself if you have the access to the federal court's record system. And the one thing they're not going to do is to use this group of criminals and then try to wholesale indict all the militia groups that exist. You see, this don't just affect the black militia. This affects all militias. And every militia out there should be looking at what they're trying to do. The article that I just read that was in the New York Times, I couldn't believe that shit. I'm not even gonna sit here and play. I read it. I went like, oh, they saying all militias everywhere. Oh, okay. So now you want to attack the ability of people to organize themselves peacefully and exercise but I want y'all to know that if you read this complaint, oh yeah, these white boys was about to commit a crime for real. They didn't give a fuck. Maybe we should call them not fucking around. No, they're terrorists, not a militia. And they weren't acting like a militia. at all. That is not what a militia does. We're not doing that. So please, don't sit there and feed into it. That's terrorism. That's not being a militia. Okay? Now y'all understand why? No, we're not. That's why people get kicked out. That's why people get dismissed. Sometimes you're guilty by association. But I wanted to cover that first because now I want to say this to the governor of Michigan as the leader of a militia, that what happened or what they were planning to do to you does not reflect the spirit of a militia as we understand it under the Constitution. That is terrorism that was directed at you, Madam Governor. And I believe that if you use that as the example, that you will be sadly mistaken about a lot of us who have loftier goals rather than trying to terrorize and kidnap governors. That is not an example of what a militia is. And you know, we give support. I have to support that. That's not something that you would ever. That's not what a militia is. And once a militia devolves to that type of behavior, then let's call it what it is. Okay, we're not. That's not what we're about. And I hate to see that the rest of the world is using that as the example. Like that's all everybody's doing is sitting around plotting on shit like that. It's not. No, that's not what it is. That's not what it is. Now I don't know, what their position was as far as violating the Constitution. That's their opinion, but they do not represent militias in the United States. That's my statement on that. I want to make sure I get that out there.
Okay, now I hope you all heard that. I hope you all was listening to what was just said very clearly. Very clearly. Now, for one, I want to preface this show with saying that I support total freedom and liberation for Grandmaster Jay. I think he should be free. And I think his freedom should be expedient. I think that he is an innocent man. And I think we should support him mentally, physically, spiritually, and economically in his quest for freedom. So I want to be clear at the beginning of this radio show that I think he deserves our support in any way that we can to expedite his path and journey towards freedom. Let's be clear at the beginning that I'm not saying we should not support him at this point in the game. If he needs assistance, assist him within your capacity to do so. I also want to preface this that with this document, I'm not saying I'm not saying that we should be or promoting or condoning being anti-government. That's not what I'm saying. I'll start this whole video off by prefacing that. This is not an anti-government promotion. Because black supremacy, KNBS, is anti-everything that is against black rulership. Any group, any entity, government, non-government. So we're not specifically anti-government unless the government shows directly that it is against us. And in the case that it shows that, we have every right and we are in total position to be against any group or any entity that is against us. No one is off the chain. Anybody can get it. So this is not specifically an anti-government group. If they leave us to fuck alone, we'll leave them to fuck alone. That's anybody. If they peaceful with us, we'll be goddamn it peaceful with them. That's anybody. But there's nobody that is off of that. There's nobody that's free from that because they are a government, because they this, that, and the other, or of any group, that they're free from getting it. So I'm going to be clear on that. That, like Malcolm said, by any means necessary, any means necessary, and I'll go even further. By any and every means necessary and unnecessary. So we were even willing to go the unnecessary means to get our point across. We even willing to do the unnecessary if it becomes necessary. Talk black to me. So I want to first begin with that the anti-government is a narrative to make you off of what you want. You're so afraid to be anti-government that's a narrative that they use so that you don't go 100% with black nation building and black power. because you don't want to be anti-government. You don't want to be anti that. No, don't even remove that. It's just 100% on black rulership. 100% on black supremacy. 100% on black nation building. That should be the real way that it is presented. Now, when you look at it, you got to look at the people in the past. Turner was against white supremacy. But Nat Turner was anti-government, anti-establishment, because the government condoned slavery. So in order to become a free person during slavery, you had to go against the government. This is a fact. Now, the government began to make some changes to so-called abolish slavery, where certain entities still wanted to push racist agendas and still want to maintain the institutions of racism, while the government tried to drift away from that. But in the beginning, even if you're dealing with the Jim Crow laws, the government supported slavery. So if you were seeking to be a free man, you would be anti-government. So get in a time machine now and go back in time and say where your freedom is concerned. Would you be afraid to be anti-government back in the 1600s, back in the 1800s, back in the 1700s? Would you be afraid to be anti-government? Because, like I said, slavery was a legal institution that was backed by the government. And all racist organizations and institutions are backed by the government. They have a right to become corporations and non-for-profit organizations or whatever they are, the Ku Klux Klan. Okay? They are a government, certified organization. They fill out their paperwork and documentation, and they have the right to exist in this country. The KKK is a legal institution. Let's be clear. It's a legal corporate entity. It was a legal corporate entity back during slavery, and it is a legal corporate entity today. So Nat Turner had to be anti-government. He didn't have a choice because it was about freedom. Today, nothing has changed. It's freedom. There's not a question of being pro or anti-government when it comes to your freedom as a black person, when it comes to your freedom and liberation. Let's be clear on that. That's the first. You got to choose to be free or not looked at as anti-government. Make up your goddamn mind. That's why you can't worship two masters. You can only love one and hate the other. See, Grandmaster Coon has two masters. A part of him wants to be free. He wants to represent black liberation, but he is still under white supremacy, and he still looks for validation, and he still takes pride in being under supremacy. He's proud being a United States citizen. He's proud of that. He's proud of the Constitution and all this. He's proud to be under white supremacy. So freedom doesn't really care about no government or freedom. Doesn't care about that. Because all of our ancestors had to they broke the law. Harriet Tubman broke the law by freeing slaves. She stole somebody else's property. Harriet Tubman was a thief that stole people's property. Because back in the day, a black man was legal property. Still wars of the state today. We're still under white supremacy. We can't leave the country without a passport, without his certification, without his authorization. Now they want to force vaccines on you. Today, you are still under the same devil that you was under back in slavery. Nothing has changed. It may not be so advertently brutal. It might not be so boldly brutal. And even though we've seen a lot of police brutality, we've seen a lot of innocent black men getting shot down by the police, innocent, unarmed black men shot by the police, and we're still filling up the prison industrial complex as their cattle. But it still is not as brutal as it was as far as us just getting hung every day. And us being under every European we come across, us being in total submission to that European and being subservient in the most obnoxious way. But things have not changed. The quest for true freedom still remains for black people. This is a fact. And if anybody becomes an enemy to that freedom, to that sovereignty, to that nation building, to that rulership, to us coming back into the power of who we are, then we must defend ourselves against that entity, period, no matter who it is. It's not a question of anti-government, pro-government, whoever. It's not a matter of that. It doesn't matter who it is. Next, I want to talk about, he mentioned a difference between a militia and a terrorist group. Now, the definition of a terrorist was created by the United States government, okay? That's not our definition. We didn't make up that word. That word does not serve our purpose. We did not label anyone according to their laws, their government. We did not create the terrorist list where we determine who goes on that list. We're not the heads of the Anti-Defamation League, the Jewish Anti-Defamation League, or the Southern Poverty Law Center, or whatever you want to call it. We don't run that. So the idea of a terrorist is not our concept. So when I hear him, that's him being in the United States military and told that, we're fighting against terrorists and told what terrorism is, he's under that particular program. Grandmaster J, Grandmaster Coon is under that particular ideology of the United States military. He's under that indoctrination. That means anybody that the United States determined does not support their agenda, which is an agenda of global white supremacy and white domination, white imperialism. Anybody that's against that agenda is considered a terrorist, period. Even himself, even though he wants to call himself a militia and all that, he's still looked at as a terrorist if he doesn't support the agenda of white supremacy, period. He can try to spin it, put as much legalese on it, try to put the Constitution behind it, but he doesn't define who is a terrorist. And he doesn't define who is a militia. He's not the definer. So why he would try to play that position is really arrogant and really foolish, because they determine who the terrorists are. White supremacy does. Their alphabet boys will decide who is a terrorist. So if they say you're a terrorist, according to them, then you're a terrorist. But if he then takes that label and he wants to say a particular group is a terrorist group, then he supports white supremacy. He supports the power structure. He is pro-white supremacy government. So you don't have to be anti-government or pro-government. We don't believe in it. It's irrelevant to us. Our focus is black rulership and black supremacy. We're not pro or anti. They are irrelevant to us. He is pro this regime. He is pro-white supremacy. He is pro-white imperialism. This is the fact. To the point where he'll go and call a group that planned to overthrow the government a terrorist group, when the very information that he cites where the government allowed you to form a militia, that same information says you can overthrow the government if you feel that you are under tyranny by that government and that government no longer serves the people, that then you have a right. There's a clause that says you have a right to overthrow that government. And that's what the people he spoke of were attempting to do. They were to overthrow that government based on how they feel. That is the true objective of a militia, according to how it is framed. Militias can overthrow the government according to the Constitution. Now, I don't support any of that, and I'm not caught up in any of that. I'm just telling you what it is. I'm telling you what it is according to what it is. So why he would say that this particular militia group is a terrorist? Because they are more aggressive, because they are more violent, because they are more forthright, shows how much of a good Negro and a coon that he is. to the point he's going to redefine what a militia is to disqualify groups that are formed based on feeling that they are under the tyranny of this particular regime and that this government no longer supports them. The problem with this is that Grandmaster Coon does not tell you what a real militia is supposed to be doing. The way he makes it sound like is that the militia is just nothing but a parade. People go out with guns. They don't really intend to shoot anyone. There is no application of a militia. There's no application to how he sees a militia. Because if the government takes their rights, goes against their rights, then you shoot those who consider themselves to be government officials. If a non-government official, somebody operating in color of the law, or some type of institution, or just a regular citizen infringes upon your rights, you shoot them. Who is Grandmaster Jay? Who is his guns for? Who is he defending his rights against? And if he's defending his rights in a way that does not require arms, then why does he have guns? The people who's coming after him is the government. That's who flew a drone into his house. That's who kicked in his door. Were government agents. That's who took away his rights by putting a felony on him. Okay, that's who him on social media that took away his freedom of speech. It's the government that did this. We're not saying be anti-government. We're saying who is taking your rights from you. That's who you are. That's who you would have to be against if you are a defender of your rights based on the Constitution. You have to defend them against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Domestic will include those who are inside of the government, those who are inside this country that are against you, that you also have to defend your rights against them according to that information, according to that doctrine. So if you're not going to use guns to defend yourself from those who are explicitly and directly infringing upon your rights, then you don't need guns. Because they're not for the enemy. I'm not saying the enemy is specifically the government. I'm saying the enemy is anybody that would infringe upon your rights. Anybody. And the reason I keep it within the framework of anybody is because it's not always going to be the government. It could be anybody. So I don't think you should be over-fixated on that it is the government. But one thing that is inescapable is that history has shown that it is the government over and over again, that it is the federal government that has attacked black leaders and black organizations since the beginning of their conception. The government that killed Fred Hampton. It was the government that was involved in the death of Malcolm X. It's the government that locked up Yahweh Ben. It's the government that took down Dr. Malachi Z. York. It's the government that locked up Marcus Garvey and had him deported. It's the government every single time. The federal government, the FBI has destroyed black leaders. This is history. The COINTELPRO, this is history. So they have shown themselves to be an enemy of black freedom. So you have to be anti anybody that is an enemy of black freedom, period. You cannot pick and choose. You cannot protect your house and your home and give somebody a pass. Either you are a protector or you're not. Either you are a defender or you are not. That's the bottom line. So you can't say, well, I'm going to put my gun down because you're a government agent. I'm putting my gun down because you're a government agent that look like me. I'm going to put my gun down because you're a grizzly bear and I like bears. I'm going to put my gun down because you're a lion and I'm a cat lover. I'm going to put my gun down because you're a dog, but you're a rabid pit bull. No, you defend yourself and defend your rights against anybody. So when you present to us that you are taking up arms under the auspices of defending your rights, but then you do not utilize them against those who are an enemy against your rights, then you are a hypocrite. and you are a contradiction, and you are a coon. Because it's two dimensions to it. One dimension is you're a black man that will not fight the enemies of your ancestors, the enemies of your liberation struggle, the enemies of your struggle towards freedom. You will not fight them after you presenting yourself that you would. After you get guns. We didn't tell you to go get guns. We didn't tell you to go get weapons. You did. And not only will you not defend your constitutional rights, which you claim to be so pro-American, which is what these militias are, so pro-American. Not only will you not defend your rights based on being an American national or an American patriot, you also will not stand up on the basis of the black freedom and black liberation struggle. That at least if you're not going to shoot those who would attack you, who would seek to destroy you, that you would at least call them out. That you would at least expose them for being who they are. You don't. What you do is you start to attack those who are against those that are against you. And that's what Coon does. That's what Coons do. They don't go at the enemy. They go at the enemy's enemy. If you're not going to shoot straight, you still should be able to compute straight. So we know that the people who came at him, the people who seek to take him down, to sabotage the NFAC, to remove him from leadership, to take the momentum and the motivation of that black militant group, was an arch enemy, which is an old time enemy that continues to repeat. History continues to repeat itself. And we thinking if you got guns and weapons that you're willing to stand against it all, that you're finally willing to stand up. And what do? You sit down harder than anyone has ever sat down before. He says the NFC is the only militia that do not feel like they're under the tyranny of the government. Did you hear what this man said? He said they're the only militia ever to not feel that they are under the tyranny of the government. This is super cooning. He apologized he basically apologized indirectly on behalf of people he say that misrepresent what a militia is. He referred to the governor as Madam Governor. He might well say Massa Governor. Come on. And he said, that's not what a militia seeks to do, to overthrow the government. That's not what a militia seeks to do, to plan, plot, and strategize on destroying the government. This is what he says. So I ask you, Grandmaster Jay, what does the militia do? What are you to do when they keep shooting you down in the streets, when they keep taking your black leaders hostage, keep silencing your organizations and destroying and sabotaging your organizations? What do you do? I don't care whether you call yourself a black militant. I don't care if you call yourself a black militia. I don't care if you call yourself a black terrorist. These are all just playing with words. And depending on how the perceiver feels or how the framer feels, they all are the same. They all are really the same. They're just a different way of saying the same thing, or different degrees of the same thing, or how the person that's framing it feels. Because if they feel a certain way about you, you're a terrorist. If they feel okay, I guess, all right with you, then, you're just a militia. If you're going hard on a position that's against theirs, and they say, well, you're just a militant. And it's just a play with words. And this play on words is a distraction from what we are literally up against. What are you supposed to do? What is the object of a militia? What is the object of a militant? What is the object of a black militant? What's the object of a black militia? What is the object of a black terrorist? And what is the difference in the objectives of the three? What separates them? And what do they all have in common? Talk black to me. Since we playing with semantics, what's the objective? I asked Grandmaster Jay humbly, what is the purpose of a black militia? Because you went and you was tough when it came to Stone Mountain. And you went up to Stone Mountain to call out the crackers and the red, and then none of them showed up. They didn't show up not because they were cowards. They didn't show up not because they were scared. They showed up because they weren't your real enemies. That they are a distraction from who your real enemy is. And your real enemy was not at Stone Mountain. Your real enemy showed up at your address, showed up at your home. You called out your real enemy with arms. And your real enemy showed up with arms. Black community, and you have guns. You're going to defend your rights, and you have guns. But what may be more effective at defending your rights at this particular time, according to the strategy of your choice, is a high-powered attorney, is a high-powered lawyer. So instead of 100 million men, a million-man gun march on Stone Mountain, you should have had a million-man lawyer march from the strategy that you're choosing. And people say, why do you all speak with guns? Why do you always, we should all get armed and we should all get guns. And I said it repeatedly because I said, you're not going to use your guns against the enemy. You're not going to use your guns when it's time. You're going to get yourself killed. You're going to get yourself in trouble. You're playing with fire because you're not about that life. And you got to be honest with yourself. It's not an attack on you. It's not disrespect of you. It's all honesty because that's how you grow. That's how you develop. That's how you become true. That's how you become sincere. You realize, hey, you ain't about that life, so stop playing. There's no confusion of what the difference between a terrorist and a militia and a militant is. There's no confusion there. The reality is you're not about that life. You're not about either of them lives. You're about trying to convince your enemy. You are trying to parade yourself before your enemy. You're begging your enemy for attention. You seek the glory to be glorified by your enemy's world, your enemy's reality. That's it. You're just putting on a parade, just putting on a show. And the show makes you're the reality of who your enemy is, and you actually put your people to sleep by doing that. You put your people to sleep and potentially in danger. Because if you go out hunting lions, but you don't plan on dealing with the lion, if you go out hunting bears, but you don't plan on dealing with the bear, then you put yourself in danger. The real white supremacists are not the KKK, are not racist rednecks, are not Trump supporters. There are racists and those who discriminate and commit hate crimes among the poor white population. Okay, let's be clear on that. But they do not have the wherewithal to suppress the Black Power movement. They do not have the wherewithal or the intelligentsia to suppress, oppress, or repress the Black Power movement. They do not. They do not. The ones that do are in the government and have all the resources and the money and the ammunition and the time, and they have the designated job and designated position to neutralize any attempts or efforts you make towards independence, sovereignty, or liberation in the United States of America. This is clear. I'm not confused about that. We saw what happened to the MOVE organization. We saw what happened to the Black Panthers. We saw what happened in the 60s. We saw what happened to Mumia. We saw what happened to Assata Shakur. We saw what happened, Black leaders and organizations. We saw. Now, are some of these white supremacists in government? Yes. Are some of these what we think are rednecks and hillbillies and white supremacists and ultra-conservatives and super rights, are they in government? Of course they are. They got government jobs too. And them the ones you need to be worried about. Them the ones you need to be concerned about. Them the ones that's going to kick in your door. Them the ones. Them the ones that are going to be really threatened by you. Them the ones that's really threatened. Them the ones that's really worried. They're paid to worry. They have a salary to worry about what Black people are doing, about how powerful Black people are getting, about how subversive Black people are getting. They're paid to worry about that. So my whole thing with Grandmaster Jay is, who did you have the guns for? And if you had the guns for nobody, then you should not have had the gun to begin with, because you put yourself in danger and you played into your enemy's hands. And now you're cooning and now you're buffooning. Now you're cooning and now you're buffooning. A Black militia has no purpose if it is not going to defend itself. Black people getting armed has no purpose if they're not going to defend themselves. Let's be clear on that. And just because you get armed and just because you have guns do not mean that you are going to defend yourself when the time comes. And just because you're not armed right now, and just because you do not have guns right now, does not mean that when the time comes that you will not effectively and efficiently defend yourself by any means necessary, based on what you truly stand for and what you are really aware of. Let's be clear that everybody unarmed ain't going. And some people armed are going. Let's be clear on that. The problem is, you believe in a gun, you worship the gun. You live by the sword, you die by the sword. If you think the gun represents power, then when your enemy flash it in your face, you'll be on your knees. If the gun is not your God, you will not fall on your knees when you see them armed and they have weapons and all this fear tactics. They're the real terrorists. Oh, they're the real terrorists. Because they terrorize more than they kill. They terrorize more than they killed. When you look at how many Black men are in jail, the statistics of how many they had to kill in order to enslave the amount that they have, they had to use their gun far less than you would imagine. That their strategies of terrorism are more effective in enslaving the Black man in America than they really have to shoot. Yeah, we getting killed here, shot there. But they're using methods of terrorism more effectively than they are actually assaulting us. This is a fact. So I had to talk about that. Who are the guns for? What is the purpose of a militia? What's the purpose of a gun group? Why have guns if you're not going to use them? You're just going to get yourself in trouble. You're going to put yourself in danger. You see a lot of people, they get pulled over by police. They have guns. They get shot in the car at a regular traffic charge, at a regular traffic stop. Most of them have no intentions on shooting. No intentions on shooting back. But they're dead right now. Grandmaster Jay is lucky to be alive right now because he presented himself as to what could be perceived by the enemy as a terrorist, as a militant, as a radical. And it doesn't matter how you see yourself. Anybody that's truly about warfare knows that it's never about how you see yourself. It's always about how your enemy sees. If you walk through the jungle, the lion sees you as meat. It doesn't matter how you see yourself. So stop acting like your definition of who you are and what you're doing is what matters. No. If you walk through the jungle, you're meat to that lion. We walking through our neighborhoods, our community, we walking through America, we are prey to white supremacy. They prey upon us. It doesn't matter whether you think you're a militia or think you're this. It's how your enemy sees you. And if your enemy sees you as a threat in how you explicitly or directly present yourself, you better be that real threat. And it better not be a threat. It better be real. And I think we have learned that through what has happened with Grandmaster Jay. That now he wants to be a constitutional attorney. And he wants to fight for his rights. And he sounds like he wants to make constitutional arguments and redefine what a militia is. And well, you should have been arguing. You should have just been a great debater. You never should have picked up the gun to begin with because you wasn't going to use it. You're not going to use it. And then not only you're not going to use it, you're going to become a cheerleader for your enemies. Oh, I never was anti-government. I was not anti-this, anti-that. You should be against anything that is against you. Period. Somebody can come, they act like anybody can under any badge or under any auspices can be corrupt. So there's no pass for anybody. There's no pass for no government. If you against black rulership, if you represent the mindset that put our ancestors in slavery and tortured them and mutilated them and raped and robbed them, if you represent the spirit of that, we don't give a goddamn what you represent. If you represent white supremacy, if you represent domination over black people, if you represent destruction to black leadership, if you represent destruction to black organizations for their own upliftment and their own liberation, you are our enemy. Period. Now you want to play on that we have been programmed in America and that we've been educated on the Constitution and told that we are citizens and we're supposed to have some loyalty to this country. You want to play on that and utilize that to run in on us? You got another motherfucking thing coming, man. You got another thing coming. You're not gonna play on that. We was ruling before we was enslaved. We was kings. We was gods before slavery. We ran our own thing. We was the ruler of the seas, of the 7 seas. Rulers of the planet, independent. And we still that. So you're not going to overlay, but this government in America, you need to be this, you need to do that. No. You're putting us back in slavery with that. We want to return to our rightful state and our rightful position on this earth, and nothing. No government, no constitution, no laws, no religion, no white supremacy, no ideology, no alphabet, no organization of men will infringe upon our right to our own independence and our own sovereignty and our own nationhood. We will not accept that. So you can try to use that programming, that American programming, that constitutional United States programming, all the fuck you want, and it will not compute over here. It will not compute. You cannot tell us we're going to be a slave and we're going to be under you no more. You can't tell us that. We can't hear that no more. We're not hearing that no more. Oh, you anti-government. No, I'm anti-anything that does not embrace our independence, our sovereignty, our liberation, and our freedom. I am anti that shit. Now, if your government rules over you, I'm not against it. I'm not against white people ruling over white people. I'm not against white people governing white people. I'm not against white people telling white people what to do. I'm not against white people, having their own nationhood amongst themselves. I'm not against that. So I'm not anti-government. I'm anti-slavery. I'm anti-white domination. I'm anti-white supremacy, white superiority, white authoritarianism, white tyranny, white dictatorships. That's what I'm anti. Now, you rule over your goddamn self. I don't have a thing to say to you. Rule over your goddamn self, because that's what you need to do. That's what needs to happen. White people need to check white people and get their shit in order. That's what they need to do. Because if they did that, slavery would have never happened to begin with. But they still so busy trying to govern other people that's moving into their own state of independence. They're preoccupying themselves with black people trying to reset up themselves and reestablish themselves and resituate themselves. Now, for black people that want to be under white supremacy, the hell with. If you want to be under white supremacy, that's your choice. You have a right. I tell people that all the time. You have a right to be under white supremacy if you want to. If you choose to have a master in 2020 going into 2021, that's up to you. You have the freedom. See, that's one of your freedoms. You're free to be under white supremacy if you want to be. That's your choice. So if white people want to rule over Negroes that want to be under them and tell them what to do and govern them, and Negroes that respect them and honor being dominated by them and honor them being their masters and all that, that's okay. That's fine until those Negroes wake up. If that's what they want, more power to you. Govern those who want to be governed by you. Govern those that want to be under you. It's like a relationship. Be with those that want to be with you. Marry those that want to marry you. Have a covenant with those that want to have a covenant with you. Have a contract with those that want to have a contract with you. Agree with those that want to agree with you. But those that don't, leave them the fuck alone. Leave them the fuck alone. And that's what's going on with this country. They act like because some Negroes is happy-go-lucky being under them. Some Negroes is happy being patriotic and loving them and having them as a master. Some Negroes love that. So they go and assume every black man do. And they sacrifice the independence of a few for the foolishness of the many. And we're not going for that. See, when you say you don't mind being under white supremacy, which is what I hear with Grandmaster Jay, he doesn't mind being under the white man. He doesn't see that as tyranny. He's not really anti-white supremacy. If white supremacy is, implemented under the auspices of government, then he's not against it. But he's against some redneck somewhere who barely got fucking gas to make it to where the fuck you at. Who gonna ride a horse and a pig to get to where you at. He's against some redneck up in Stone Mountain. But if white supremacy comes under the auspices of the government, which it has repeatedly historically, then I can't be against it, because if I'm against that, I'm against the government. So I'm not against the government. So I accept white supremacy when it comes to the government. But you don't accept if black people piss you off. Oh, you ready to shoot? If black people piss you off, you ready to kill. But if the white man under the auspices of government comes at you, then you ready to cop a plea. Then you ready to hands up, don't shoot. And that's what's going on within our communities and within our societies. We tough when it comes to black people, but when it comes to white supremacy, we're powerless. So that's what I had to say on that. I had to look at that. Really disturbed me when I heard the statements that he made in playing word games. I'm not saying that the police ran up in his house, he should have shot it and killed police officers and got a life sentence and got murdered and got killed. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying you should stand up for what you stand up for and represent what you represent. And just because you're not tough enough to stand up for what you represented, don't start singing another song now. Don't back off now. Don't obscure who your enemies are now. If you call out your enemies, and they gonna show up. And when the real that's what you should say. I say this. Don't be anti-government. Don't be anti-black, anti-white, anti-Chinese, anti-Mexican. Don't be anti-anything. Just when your real enemies show up, be ready. When you see who is an enemy to freedom and liberation, independence and sovereignty for black people, when you see who shows up, just deal with them. You don't have to assume. I don't assume the people that got jobs working for the FBI, the same FBI that agents that took down Fred Hampton or were working in the 60s. A lot of them is dead. I don't assume that. But I don't assume that they ain't either. I don't assume that every white cop is a racist and is ready to kill a black man on the spot. I don't assume that. But I don't assume that he ain't either. You should stay in a position to be when the real enemy show up. When the real enemy show up. If you call out the real enemy show up based on what you're doing, be present to deal with the real enemy. And don't call them out. Don't call them out if you ain't ready to deal with them. And don't call him out and then he comes from somewhere else and you pretend like you don't see him there. That you was putting on the show for some rednecks in Stone Mountains, but the real enemy for him was inside of the federal government. The real enemy was someone who framed his expression of his amendments. That's criminal. That's criminal. They say he aimed some guns at some federal agents. I don't know if that's true or that's false. But you don't need to aim a gun if your immediate life is not in jeopardy. And you don't need to go out and show the masses that you have guns. But if you do have guns, use them when necessary. Bottom line. Because you got guns, you're not using them, you're going to jail for not using the gun. You're facing 10 years and more, and they're charging you in the state and charging you in the federal, and you haven't even used a gun. And they've used their guns to kill Breonna Taylor. They've used their guns to murder black people. They've used their guns to kill Fred Hampton. They have used their guns to kill. And they did it boldly and unapologetically and with an agenda. And here it is, you haven't even used your gun that you presented. And you're being persecuted and prosecuted, and you haven't even used your gun to even defend yourself or your honor as the leader of your organization and as a representative of black men standing up and defending themselves against any enemy. You see Malcolm X. I like this. You know, Malcolm X in a very famous picture of him standing by the window, you know, with his gun. He said, I was willing to shoot anybody I saw. Huh? When his house was firebombed, he said he was willing, he would go outside and he said he would have shot anybody that was in sight. Anybody. That's not anti-government. That's anybody that would infringe upon his rights and put his nation, his people, his family, his culture in danger. This is a fact. So that's the mentality that is consistent, black militancy and black power. That is the attitude that is consistent. And if you're not prepared to deal with that enemy, don't call out that enemy. Don't present yourself in a way that you're not prepared to. Don't put your life in danger if it is not necessary. Don't sacrifice your freedom where it is not necessary. Because at the point that you're willing to sacrifice your freedom, you must be willing at the same time in order to lay down your life. And that's where Malcolm X says the price of freedom is death. At the point that you're willing to give up your freedom, you should equally be willing to give up your life. I saw, you know, Grandmaster Jay in his prison picture, in his jail picture, county jail picture, I don't know, in the picture that his mugshot is what they used to call it. His shirt said freedom. I said, how could you be wearing a shirt that says freedom on your mugshot picture and you literally are in jail at the time of that picture? The time that you are willing to pick up guns, at the time and moment that you are willing to pick up a gun, let it not be for a parade. Let it not be for a festival, for a show, for a rally. Let it be the point where you have truly searched within yourself and said, either give me liberty or give me death. Let it be at that point. Because once you armed and present yourself in a militant way and present yourself like that before the world, you taunt your enemies and give them justification to come for you in the most militant way that you can possibly imagine. And when they come for you, they're not going to be they're militants, whether they're terrorists or whether they are militia. They won't be confused about it. They won't have no issue with those words. They'll know exactly what their agenda is, and however you see them, that's up to you. It don't matter to them how you see them, how you perceive them. If you say they're terrorists, if you say they're militants, if you say it won't matter to them. They know what they're coming to do. They know what they're coming to do. So when I say renounce the enemy's world, I'm saying you don't have to present yourself in a way that he does. We think equality means looking like him. We think having rights means being the same as him, imitating him in his world. being something alongside of him, proving ourselves relative to him. No. He becomes irrelevant. He becomes irrelevant. He is not a significant factor in order to validate our reality. And as long as we allow him to continue to be that, he will continue to show up. He will continue to show up to prove his point.